Good evening. I'm up on the Black Range today, what everybody calls the Black Range, and I am on, probably can't see it, trail number 79. So this is the trail that heads up to Hillsboro Peak, kind of that area. So to get here, you start off at an Emery Pass. So Emery Pass is the crest as you're going over the Black Range, headed, between Hillsboro and Membris. And it's pretty interesting up here. It's if you're looking for views, this is the place to go. The sign for Emery Pass down here says that it's named after Lieutenant W.H. Emery, who brought the cavalry, or brought his troops across in 1846. But there's a lot of controversy by that, because historians don't think that he ever went through here. Which, if you've ever been up here, it's pretty rough, and so it would make sense that he wouldn't go this way, and he would go down around the edge of the mountain south, down towards Cook's Peak and that area, because it'd be a lot easier than trying to make it over the mountain pass. You can see the road down here as I'm climbing up, and it has an interesting story behind it. In the early 20s, cars were starting to get reliable and people were starting to travel for recreation use. And they had just built Elephant Butte dam, like the dam there. I think in 1916 is when it was finished. And so they decided that they were going to make a tourism road that they're calling it the Dammed Dam Road. So it was going from Elephant Butte over to Roosevelt Lake or Roosevelt Reservoir. And they decided that they, instead of going around like everybody had forever, down by Cook's Peak, down by Deming, they decided to build a road across here. And it took a while for them to get permission. Then there was a businessman in Hillsboro who wanted tourists to go through Hillsboro and buy gas and food and stuff, and lodging. So he convinced them to build the road over Emery Pass. And they eventually got it done in 1935. It was a pretty big feat in itself, just building a road, especially with the equipment that they had at that point. And then later on, so it was a dirt road for a long time. And then finally in 1959, they paved it. And they've been maintaining it, and it's been having problems ever since. It gets washed out all the time. Snow pack is bad in the winter. There's no shoulder or anything, so it's an interesting road. But anybody around here, if you just say I'm going over the Black Range, they know that you're talking about Highway 152, and it's just kind of a common thing around here is to drive up the windy road. That right there, that's Sawyer's Peak, and on the other side of that is where the Silver Fire started in 2013. That burned all of this and a lot more. Everything that I'm going through today, it will be within that burn area. as it goes to Black Range trails, this is probably one of the best ones, maintenance wise. And it's part of the Crest Trail, which goes all the way along the crest, and it's part of the Continental Divide bypass area. So if people don't want to go up the river, they'll come up here. And so with all of that, Forest Service does a pretty good job of keeping it maintained, especially this first little stretch. At least being in this burn, if it's not maintained and there's not travel on it, like all those other trails are really rough. You can't make it on a horse on a lot of them, and you're just fighting the brush if you're walking. Right down here in the bottom, that's Kingston. See a long ways. All of these rock walls, or most of them, were built by CCCs, still standing, so they did a good job. There's quite a few of them on this trail. This is what it looked like everywhere before the fire came through. Maybe even a little bit cleaner than this, but pretty much like this, and now it's just burnt. And it's been 10 years. So right here, there's a trail that drops down into the canyon, and you end up in Kingston. I don't think anybody's been using it, and so I'm pretty sure you couldn't make it on a horse. Maybe you could, I'm not really sure, but it can be pretty rough. It's a little bit easier just to drive up to the pass. We're getting close. We'll see if we can get up there before dark. I made it to the top, the lookout tower, but it's getting dark, and I need to go water these horses, so I'm gonna go check this spring, see if it has water. I'm back on top just as sunset. It's getting dark, so I figure I'll find a tree to lay under here, get the horses taken care of. But probably climb up there tonight because I've never been up there in the dark. But I'll show you around in the morning. Good morning. It was a clear night last night. I had a pretty good view of all the surrounding towns, all the way from like Memphis and Silver. The mine, you could see them working in the mine, and then over on the east side, you could see Caballo, Elephant Butte. You could even see down to like Hatch, kind of maybe even Las Cruces. So you could see a ways from up here. I climbed up the tower, tried to video, can't see anything, it's just dark. Cameras never show it, especially all the stars and stuff at night. But let me show you around. Hillsboro Peak is 10,011 feet high in elevation, and I know that because it says on the sign, but it's actually one of the highest peaks in the Gila with a lookout tower on it, and there's 10 of them. So 10 of them within the Gila, and this is one of them. If you're not familiar with these lookout towers, the way that it works, well, first, before there was a tower, they would just man somebody on these peaks. So some young kid, probably, they'd pay him to sit up here all summer and just look for fires. And you can see pretty well without just off the, off the ground. And so that's how it would start. And then in the early 20s, they built a wood structure. So I don't know how tall it was, but a wood platform. So they would climb up there. In 1925, they built this little red cabin. I'm sure it wasn't red originally, but it's been red my whole life. So the red cabin, 1925, and this is the one that is open to the public. So I'll go show you around a little bit. Not much to it. Think they carried those by hand? Quickcrete? Probably not. There's a logbook in the cabin, just like most peaks. And there was a big group here yesterday. I ran into one guy on the way in, but I was coming in the evening. And so this is pretty much almost every day or every weekend there's somebody up here. But in 1933, they built the metal tower. So it's 45 foot for 45.9 or something. And it's an aero motor. And the box up there is 7 foot by 7 foot. So it's a 7 by 7 square. Pretty small. Unfortunately, because there's so much traffic to this cabin, everything is locked up. So if you go to more remote cabins or towers, they're open, but this one's locked up pretty tight. Like, I even tried to get water out of their cistern for the horses, and even that's locked. So let me go show you the tower. I'll climb up to as high as I can, but I can't get into the box itself. It might be too windy to hear me, but you can see a long ways. You can see the mine clear, both mines, or the Tyrone and Chino mine. If you look this way, the sun's in the way. You can see Elephant Butte pretty clear. You can see up north towards, I don't know, just more Gila stuff. So you can see a long ways. You can see back to the truck. You can see Sawyer's Peak over there. You can't really see Emery Pass, but Membris is just right here. So you can also see Kingston and Hillsboro. You probably can't hear me because of the wind, so I'm going to go down and I'll tell you a little bit more about it. But it's a bummer. When I was a kid, this used to always be open. Hey, Bo. The way these lookout towers work is somebody's stationed here. Every morning they climb up there and they look for fires, spend most of the day, and they come down and they just hang out. So if you like a solitary lifestyle, this would be a pretty good job. But up there's a big round map. It's called an alidad, and it has these sights that kind of turn. So if they spot a fire, they can get a bearing on it, and then another tower would get another bearing on it, and they would triangulate it, and they know exactly where the fire was or is. And yeah, it's be an interesting life. They used to have telegraph wires, and then it went to telephone, and then now they use radios and stuff. I'm not sure when the last time this was manned for the full summer. Probably about 10 years ago, from what I can tell. They still come up here quite a bit. Like, there's a wheelbarrow and stuff that wasn't here last time I was here. So I know that they've been kind of still using it, but I just don't know if it's actually manned. And they do, they call them hitches, kind of like the military, but these are 7-day hitches, so they're on for 7 days and they're off for 6. So there's a chance that they're just on their off days right now. But I don't think so. I don't think anybody's manning it. The other reason why they're not manned is because it's easier for them to get in an airplane or a helicopter and make a loop around real quick and spot all the fires and just GPS coordinate them, and then they can monitor them and they can get closer and look at them. They also use like lightning strike technology, so they know where all the lightning strikes hit, and so that they know where to go check to see if there's fires. In 1965, they built this metal cabin. So this is the one that Forest Service uses today. They leave the other one for the public. This is the one for the people who are staying here. So I'll kind of show you around that one. They got it locked up pretty tight. There are dishes in the sink, so maybe they are using it, I don't know. There are designated helicopter landing pads within the Gila. This is one of them. I know where there's quite a few different places, but yeah, so I'm not really sure how that works. Like if they're allowed to land helicopters here all the time, or if it's just for fires or official use. But I always thought it'd be pretty cool. Like if you had a helicopter, if anybody wants to give me a helicopter, I'll see if you can just land at them anytime. I'm sure there's rules against it, because if anybody could just land at these places, they probably would. According to the sign, Aldo Leopold thought this was one of the best views of the Gila. So we're actually in the Aldo Leopold Wilderness right now, which is part of the Gila National Forest. And it's 100 years old this year, so everybody's kind of making a big deal about the wilderness being 100 years old. How many times do you think that tower's been struck by lightning? Hillsboro Peak is named after the town of Hillsboro, which is just down in the bottom here. And the way it got named is kind of interesting. So it was a mining town back in the 1870s to 1890s, and all of the miners put a name in a hat that they wanted to name it, and they drew one out, and it was Hillsboro, but it was spelled different, and then they shortened it to what we know as Hillsboro today. If you found this video because you're planning on coming up to Hillsboro Peak or in this area, pretty much showed you everything for the most part. So you might want to just stop watching the video now. But I wanted to share some personal stuff, not personal, like family stuff. Everybody used to write their names in the tower, and it was kind of like a logbook for who was there and stuff. And we knew that my grandparents, Dale and Ruth, who Dale ranched a lot of this country around here, and they lived in Kingston. They were stationed up here, and according to their names on the wall, they were up here in the spring and summer of 1959. And my dad was born in 1960, January of 1960. So if you do the math, my dad got his start here in this cabin, which means I got my start, kind of in a weird way, here in this cabin. And I've been up here quite a few times because it's not very far from the house. I don't usually show my camp because this is it. When I say I'm gonna find a tree to lay under, that's literally what I do. I didn't even find a very big one this time. My granddad died before I was born, so I never got to know him. And all I could do is ask people, tell me stories, things like that. And he seemed like a pretty interesting guy, a little rough. My granddad Dale, he one of his best friends his name was Homer Parsons, and he would carry around an old 8mm video camera, and a lot of the places that they went were up here around Hillsboro Peak. And most of the time it was when they were on deer hunts or something like that. So I just remember as a kid, Homer would show up. He's from Anthony. He would show up and he would set up his old projector, and we would watch those videos, and he would tell us the stories and the backstories behind it. And I just remember that there was piles of deer, dude. And not huge deer, but pretty good size. But like I said, a lot of those were from this area. The only way I could kind of get a feel for what my grandpa was like was from those silent videos, and that's what inspired me to post things on YouTube, because I'm gonna have grandkids or something, and my granddad died in his 50s on both sides, and so I figured I'd leave something. And I think YouTube, even if it goes under, I think those videos will still be accessible at some point, somehow. And so that's why I put videos up, and that's why I think you should too. The other thing is, this might be a harsh reality. Your day job doesn't really matter. Wherever you're working right now, if you quit or got fired, that company would still keep going, and you probably wouldn't even be missed. Even if you own the company, if you sold it, it would still just keep going. So most of you don't know, I'm a high school teacher. Pretty weird. But if I like to think that I made an impact in a few students' lives, but in reality, if I quit or got fired, within a year, nobody would even remember my name. So, how you spend your free time is more important to your family than what you do for work. A few years ago, I went to my Uncle Charlie McCargish. He's not even, so he's actually my grandma's cousin, but everybody just called him Uncle Charlie. And I went to talk to him specifically to ask him stories about my grandpa, so Dale. And so he knew my grandparents before they were married. And he was getting older in age, and I wish I would have recorded it somehow. But one story he told me about up here was they had taken some deer hunters. So this is probably in the 50s, before you had to have a license, but there was no guide regulations. And they're all meeting down at Emery Pass. My granddad was behind them with a packed string full of deer. And when he got down there, there was a game warden checking all the hunters. And so he was behind them, and the game warden told him, give him a minute, he was gonna talk with him. And so he made a loop, just kind of around the parking lot, I guess. And he just went back up the trail, and he hit the trail that dropped down into Kingston, and the game warden never knew what happened to him. So I don't know if he had done anything illegal, but he didn't want to talk to the game warden, so kind of shows what kind of person I don't think he trusted the government, which I can see that. Could you imagine running cows in this? Cowboys today think they're tough, but this was my granddad's allotment. There's not very many cowboys today that could work cows in this. I was curious to know when Highway 152 was paved, and I couldn't find it anywhere on the internet. So I talked to my Uncle Jim, because he's usually pretty good about history and things like that, and he, right off the top of his head, he didn't even hesitate, he said 1959. And so I was thinking, okay, he's probably making it up. And he said, then he told me he knows that because he was going to school in Hillsboro, and there were 12 of them in the school. And then when they were paving it, their school enrollment jumped up to 24, and that's because all of the workers' kids started, because it took them a while, so they hauled their kids and made them go to school there. So he knew they paved it while he was going to school in Hillsboro. And I don't know how long that school stayed open, but 12 kids in the whole school is not very big. But Silver Fire was pretty rough on this country. When I was in high school and college, and I needed to put some miles on some horses, this is one of the trails that I would use, because it's rough enough where they learn to get their footing, but it's open enough where you're not too worried about having a big wreck. And it's about a little over 5 miles to the top, and but it's all uphill, so they're usually worn out by the time you got to the top. And if you're wondering why you just want to put miles on a horse, horses are like most other things, like dogs, kids. The more time you spend with them, the better they are. And it's usually the problem ones are usually the ones that you haven't spent enough time with. And that's part of the reason why a lot of times I'll have extra animals with me. Like this time I only have one pack animal, but a lot of times I'll have 2 or 3, and for no reason. Like I pack pretty light. I don't need a lot, but I'm just trying to spend time with animals to make them better, so that way when you do need them, they're ready to go. I'm back at the helicopter pad right here by the truck, or by Emery Pass. I'm glad that the road isn't where it was supposed to be, because it was supposed to go over the top and then down Donahue and then tie into Royal John Mine Road. So that's where it was in the 20s. But that would add another about 15 miles probably of riding, which I don't have to do. So that's nice. I highly recommend this trail, either if you're walking or riding. It's pretty good. Thanks for watching.